In the shadow of Mt Vesuvius, 14 miles southeast from modern-day Naples, Italy, there stood the city of Pompei, a prosperous metropolis, rich in culture and history, where gardens and villas shared close quarters with whorehouses and slums. It stood on land populated for around 800 years, until the 24th of August, 79 CE, around lunchtime. Vesuvius erupted, burying the city and its people in rock, pumice, and ash. Laying forgotten for millennia, it was rediscovered, reigniting interest in the past, laying the groundwork for modern-day archeology, and someone made a Doctor Who about it. Two, actually. That's right, we're diving into another historical, where I compare the episodes to the real history. I've been wanting to do another one of these for a while now. I knew I wanted to do a New Who one, but the problem is New Who doesn't exactly do historicals. They do sci-fi stories with historical wallpaper. They're not exactly about the historical people or the events, but they're more about sci-fi bullshit, which is a shame. I would really like to see a return of the pure historical, where the only sci-fi element is the TARDIS and the Doctor and co get entangled in historical events. It's how they used to do it back in the classic show, and it was spectacular. Human history is filled with a lot of interesting people who live through a lot of interesting stuff. But somewhere along the line, they decided that people would just lose interest unless they shoved an alien in there somewhere. Chibnall historicals were a vast improvement in bringing the show back to its roots, as a medium to educate the audience. Demons of the Punjab, for example, is magnificent. But even then, they couldn't help but shoehorn in unnecessary aliens that aren't essential to the plot, just so the Doctor can be racist at them. But that's a rant for another time. Seeing as Donna is back, the choice was obvious. Series 4, Episode 2, The Fires of Pompeii. Before we get into it today, it is disclaimer time. I don't have a degree in history or archaeology or any field of relevance. I have a degree in business. I'm not an authority on anything, so any opinions expressed in this should be taken as the opinions of an enthusiastic amateur. This is an armoured skeptic. I don't intend to just make shit up, and I don't want to assist in the spread of misinformation. If I do so by accident, please let me know in the comments. This is just for fun. Don't take it too seriously, and do not use me as a source. I've left citations in the description below. Check them out if you want to know more, or if you're writing an essay. Now, on with the show. I was a little bit worried when picking The Fires of Pompeii. It's a favourite episode of mine, easily in my top 10 for New Who, but as far as real history goes, it's mostly pure fantasy. I mean, you got the cult of psychics paying homage to the Sisterhood of Khan, the thematically appropriate lava monsters intent on making circuit boards out of stone, and taking over the world, of course. I assumed that the video would basically just be me going, well, actually for 20 minutes, but as it turns out, there's quite a lot for me to sink my teeth into. It was filmed in, I'm gonna butcher this, Cinecittà Studios in Rome. The same place where they filmed the television series Rome, which is pretty historically accurate, and they reused a lot of the sets. This episode takes place seemingly immediately after the events of Series 4, Episode 1, Partners in Crime. The Doctor is taking Donna on her first trip in the TARDIS as a full-time companion, and decides to show her ancient Rome. The Doctor's first visit to ancient Rome was as the first Doctor, when he was travelling with Ian and Barbara. They squatted in a villa until the Doctor got bored, impersonated a musician, went on a trip to see Emperor Nero, pretended to play the lyre to great applause, punched an assassin, and accidentally caused the Great Fire of Rome, while Ian and Barbara were sold into slavery and rescued by a Christian. It was a very farcical episode, and it was pretty brilliant. It's getting its own video at some point. They soon realised that they're not actually in the city of Rome at all, it's Pompeii, and it's Volcano Day. During the 1st century CE, Pompeii was a thriving metropolis, and thanks to the climate, a popular vacation spot for wealthy Romans. Located on an ancient lava flow, the buildings were made out of the local volcanic rock, and adorned in intricate frescoes and mosaics. The city had several public baths which played a huge role in Roman social life. They had an amphitheatre which hosted gladiatorial combat and theatrical performances, sometimes at the same time. They even had fast food shops. This is a more recent discovery. It reminds me of the old ABC Chinese restaurant in my hometown. Being a tourist town, it was common for elites to bring business partners and potential clients to Pompeii to hammer out deals and contracts and do the Roman equivalent of a pub crawl. In Australian terms, it was basically the Gold Coast, only with a lot more blood sports and a lot more titties and a lot more todgers in public view. Not even joking, phallic imagery was carved into buildings, paving stones, tallywhackers all over the place. I've heard a few interpretations as to why, including a feminist reading that it reminded everybody of the patriarchal nature of Roman society. And Rome was very patriarchal, but in Roman culture, the meat and 2 beds was an emblem for good fortune. Want your family to be safe and prosperous? Carve a willy over the door, just for luck. It seems obscene by today's standards, but you have to view it in the cultural context of the time. Different cultures have different standards for these things, and they rarely line up and they're constantly changing. Take the Minoan civilization of Crete, where women covered everything except for their breasts, and men wore little more than jewellery, a loincloth, and a very ornate belt. I'm surprised Captain Jack didn't mention her as a favourite holiday spot. Tangents aside, Pompei was a wealthy and prosperous town with a strategic location that allowed for trade and commerce from throughout the empire. Shops lined the streets, where vendors sold fabric, materials, food and jewellery from as far away as Egypt and other parts of Africa. A lot of culture war type people would criticise the casting of the extras in this scene for inserting diversity where there was none, but the evidence speaks for itself. Pompei, and the Roman Empire for that matter, was a very diverse place. International trade tends to do that. So, the Doctor is determined to leave, partly because he doesn't want to die, but mostly because he doesn't want to run into the 7th Doctor, who is in the city at exactly the same time. Donna, on the other hand, is determined to stay and lead an evacuation of the city. This, after all, is what the Doctor does. He saves people, but not this time. Pompei is a fixed point, don't you know? A nebulous term which tends to mean whatever the writer wants it to mean at that moment. And here we find the main conflict of the story. This is one of the best types of stories for a companion, especially early on. The companion wanting to change something in history for one reason or another. Rose wanting to stop her father from dying in Father's Day, or Barbara and the Aztecs wanting to stop human sacrifice in Aztec culture to save them from being wiped out when Cortez arrives. It can tell you a lot about the companion, what they value, how far they're willing to go to do what they think is right, while also testing their relationship with the Doctor. It's also a learning experience for the companion, learning what they can and can't do when travelling in the TARDIS and dealing with history. The Doctor can empathise with what Donna wants to do, but he can't let her do it. When the first Doctor told Barbara that you can't rewrite history not one line, he wasn't just being stubborn. Time travel can be dangerous. You have to know what you're doing, because if you don't, you can accidentally rewrite millions of people out of existence, replacing them with other people entirely, including yourself.
Rose, there's a man alive in the world who wasn't alive before. An ordinary man, that's the most important thing in creation. The whole world's different because he's alive.
If Donna saves 100 people, their progeny would number in the thousands of new people who never would have existed otherwise. All of them changing the established timeline in small and large ways, until the future that Donna comes from no longer exists. It's all a moot point anyway, because the TARDIS is gone. Some bloke sold it to a marble merchant named Lobos Sicilius, played by Peter Capaldi, the 12th Doctor, and his wife Metella is not impressed with his purchase. They have a son, Quintus, who's a bit of a layabout, fond of partying with Christians and other such degenerates, and a daughter, Evelina, with the gift of sight. A quick note on naming conventions. The Romans used a tri-naming system for men. The first, the praenomen, was the individual identifier of family branch, usually taken from the father or grandfather. The second, the nomen, was essentially a family name, indicating the gens or clan that the person belongs to. This is usually taken from an ancestor. The third, the cognomen, was basically a nickname, based on personal characteristics or achievements. Julius Caesar's full name was Gaius Julius Caesar. His ill-fated daughter was named Julia, because women didn't get the 3 names. They got a feminized version of the father's name. So Evelina, daughter of Lobos Sicilius, should really be called Cecilia. Whatever her name is, she's promised to the sisterhood of the Sibyllime, who will be our antagonists for this evening. The Sibyls were female prophets of ancient Greece and later Rome, notable for their habits of hanging around in caves and giving their prophecies in frenzied states, likely due to the inhalation of natural gas, as was probably the case for the Sibyl of Delphi, who prophesied for the Greek god Apollo. The Sibyls in this episode seem mostly based on the Sibyllime oracles, and the Cumaean Sibyl herself, who in Doctor Who was the founder of their religion. Anyway, the Doctor and Donna barge in and call themselves Spartacus, but before they can get their hands on the TARDIS, this bloke shows up, Lucius Pectrus Dexterus.
It's an age of superstition, of official superstition. The augur is paid by the city to tell the future.
His job is basically to interpret the will of the gods through the study of observed events. You know, weather, lightning, rain, birdsong, which way the wind is blowing any particular moment. Even the vase falling off a shelf or accidentally stubbing your toe in the morning has some relevance to what the gods are trying to say. They pretty much make vague guesses and assumptions, and confirmation bias did the rest. But here they are depicted as well-spoken psychics who can predict the future.
This is the gift of Pompei. Every single oracle tells the truth.
That's impossible.
It's modernised, but it's overall a pretty solid depiction of the Roman upper-class family. The house even has a hypercourse, a form of ancient Roman central heating which circulates hot air through chambers below the floors, and in some cases up the walls through a series of pipes. These were usually wood-burning, but in this episode they're geothermally powered, from the volcano itself, which is not a thing that they did in Pompeii, I checked. One thing the scene really gets right though is Roman spiritual life. In Roman society it was believed that a household functions in relation to how well they treated their spirits. Larger gods like Jupiter and Mars were left to state-sponsored events, but the average citizen spent most of their devotion on household spirits and guardians, who are believed to have more direct influence in their lives day to day. Those who kept their rituals and honoured the gods would thrive, their prosperity evidence of their piety, while those who neglected the gods would suffer accordingly, inviting disaster and catastrophe into their lives, their misfortune evidence of their neglect. There's something that this thing gets wrong though. The Romans weren't unaware of volcanoes, they weren't a foreign concept to them. The Mediterranean is full of them, and they have influenced events enough times throughout history. The Romans just didn't suspect that Vesuvius was a volcano, or at least not an active one. According to contemporary artwork, Vesuvius was lush and forested at the peak. The locals had no idea of the danger they were in until it was too late, though there were warning signs. In a later scene, the Doctor and Lobus Caecilius, the guy being played by Peter Capaldi, the 12th Doctor, talk about a major earthquake that nearly destroyed the city, forcing them to rebuild. This was when the augurs started predicting the future. After this, lesser earthquakes became commonplace, something that the citizens just didn't question. But these earthquakes weren't just normal earthquakes. They were molten rock and gas filling the lava chamber beneath Vesuvius. In the weeks and months leading up to the eruption, the frequency of these earthquakes increased and intensified, and the people of Pompeii and other communities in the surrounding area remained completely ignorant of the danger that was to come.
There had been tremors for many days previously, a common occurrence in Campania, and no cause for panic. But that night, shaking grew much stronger. People thought it was an upheaval, not just a tremor.
Alright, you probably already noticed I've been mispronouncing Caecilius as Caecilius. I only noticed when I was most of the way through editing, and I've already delayed this thing enough times already. The thing is, he didn't actually start making the S sound until a little bit after this, which means that throughout history, people have been pronouncing Caesar wrong. Like, basically, language is hard. Here's where the real history ends and the fantasy begins. The augur isn't there just for a social visit, he's there to pick up a commission. It looks like a circuit board. Now the Doctor's interested. Intrigued, the Doctor has no choice but to stay and break into Lucius Pectrus Dexterous's home to find several more commissions that he had commissioned by other marble merchants throughout the city. Arrange them in the right order and forms a power converter. But Lucius Pectrus Jeffrus is a little bit miffed that he broke in and figured out their entire plan. The Doctor breaks off his arm, which is made out of stone, which makes him so cranky that he sets a lava monster on him. Whee! Meanwhile, Donna is chilling with the 12th Doctor's daughter, Evelina. She tries to convince her to take her family out of town just for the day. She starts telling her all about the eruption, but this is obviously fake prophecy. And Evelina is pissed and links in the sisterhood on a psychic Skype call. And next thing she knows, Donna is tied to a table and about to be stabinated.
Have eyes in the back of your head by the time I finish with you. This prattling voice will cease forever.
Oh, that'll be the day.
The Doctor soon intervenes, invading their sanctum even though he has a penis, and gains an audience with the High Priestess. Meanwhile, Evelina and the rest of the sisterhood have a very stony rash that can't be gotten rid of by any creams or ointments. And the priestess is so far gone that she is now Lady Stone. She's a stone lady. She looks like one of the victims of Pompeii, and we get this line.
The people of Pompeii are turning to stone before the volcano erupts. But why?
Yeah, this is a really annoying misconception. People see photos of the dead of Pompeii and assume that they must have been dug up like that, as if the molten rock turned them to stone instead of just burning them, but yeah, no, it's plaster of Paris. Excavators in the 19th century discovered holes and voids in the rock containing human remains. Curious, they poured in plaster of Paris and chipped away at the surrounding material, revealing facsimiles of the victims in their last moments. What happened is the people were buried in pumice and ash, and the material around them hardened as their fleshy bits rotted away, essentially making full-body death masks. Their last agonizing moments forever preserved for posterity, and for people to gawk at and assume that they must have been dug up like this and they must be made out of stone. So the Doctor discovers that the magma things are pyroviles. Shut up! And the sisterhood and the augur are turning into them because they keep breathing in the fumes from the hypercourse. The Doctor fights them all off with a water gun, and him and Donna escape through the hypercourse, which should be boiling hot and full of smoke and fumes, but whatever, we need to wrap this thing up. They follow it to the center of Vesuvius, where they find more magma monsters, and Lucius Pectrus Dexterus is there, and he brought with him the energy converter thing. Apparently it just works as is, no need to pour metal on it or make any connections. I guess marble is the most conductive substance that they could work with. So the pyroviles lost their home planet in the Time War, and they need another one, so they've decided to take over the world, boil the seas, and basically turn Earth into the surface of Venus, a planet that is still volcanically active, closer to the sun, and not covered in stuff that kills them on contact. So it's Pompei or the world, and the Doctor has to choose. A choice mirroring the choice that he made in the Time War to destroy his own people in exchange for saving the universe. In this moment, they both believe that they are going to die, and Donna chooses to sacrifice herself. Even though she's been defying the Doctor this entire time, trying to save as many people as she can see what's at stake, and she shares the burden, willing to sacrifice herself for the world. Surprise, they survive! And apparently they can outrun pyroplasmic flow. Isn't that lovely? Now we're back to reality. Much of what is known about the eruption comes from the letters of Pliny the Younger. He was 17 at the time and witnessed the eruption with his own eyes. His letters describe the events of that day, his uncle and father figure, naturalist Pliny the Elder, observing the eruption, resolving to get on a boat and get a closer look, and dying while attempting to save people. He also describes his harrowing ordeal as him and his mother make their way to safety. The magma chamber had filled with not just magma but gas. The pressure built until it was too much. turning the molten rock into foam, and the top of the mountain exploded with a thermal force 100 times greater than the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It spewed forth a column of superheated gas 33 kilometers into the air, reaching the stratosphere. With it came molten rock, pumice, and hot ash ejected at a rate of 1.5 million tons per second.
The cloud was rising from the mountain. I can best describe its shape by likening it to a pine tree. It rose into the sky on a very long trunk from which spread some branches.
There's a pretty brilliant video called A Day in Pompeii, which shows each stage of the eruption from a single vantage point, hour by hour. It was part of an exhibition for the Melbourne Museum in 2009. I'm going to shamelessly be using footage from it, but I put a link to the full video in the description below. This wasn't a quick end for the people of the surrounding area. For 12 hours, pumice and ash rained from the sky, blotting out the sun, covering the city in darkness.
We'd scarcely sat down to rest when darkness fell. Not the dark of a moonless or cloudy night, but as if the lamp had been put out in a closed room.
The people of Pompeii had little to no knowledge of what to do in a volcanic eruption. People from Spain and areas where volcanic activity was more common knew to run. But in Pompeii, when the ground shook, they knew the best thing to do was to wait inside in a secure place until it stops. That's what a lot of people did, some even apparently finding fun ways to pass the time, but pumice was raining from the sky and collecting on the roofs until it was too much and they caved in. Many people were crushed to death. Others chose to flee, some of them escaping, while many more were overcome. During this chaos as ash fell, Donna tries to save as many people as she can. She's telling people not to go to the beach because they will be trapped there when the pyroclasmic flow hits, but nobody listens. Seeing a child, she tries to take him to safety, but his mother rips him out of her arms, taking him to his death. All she wants to do is save someone, anyone, from the doom that she helped to create, but no matter what she does, she can't. She begins to break down, and the doctor pulls her along, not doing okay himself. He was just forced to relive some serious trauma. Right now, he is in the same headspace as he was after he had killed his own people in the Time War. The guilt and pain flooding back all at once, compounded by the genocide that he just committed to save the Earth. Killing people en masse for the greater good, again and again and again. A sadistic trolley problem. All he wants to do in this moment is run away, not even stopping to save the people he had gotten to know and care about for the last day, as they cower, embracing each other, waiting to die. Many families were found like this. Mothers holding their children, fathers holding their teenage son's hand, lovers embracing, offering whatever comfort they can in their last moments. One thing this episode does really well is it humanises the people of Pompeii, allowing the audience to feel the horror and tragedy that they experienced. It can be difficult to think of people of the past as being like us. There's a certain degree of separation, a disconnect of 2,000 years that allows us to see human remains of the victims as scientific curiosities or items for display. But Cecilius and his family seem like a normal, everyday family, like any other family that you may already know. The gifted daughter, the doting parents, the jealous son who acts out because nobody expects anything of him. People haven't really changed that much throughout human history. Cultures and social structure are constantly in flux, but people have always been people. Just looking at the graffiti on the walls of the buildings, it looks like something you would see on a toilet cubicle stall today. Or if in 1,000 years they dug up Twitter. The people of Pompeii were not dissimilar to people today. They lived, they dreamed, they had families, friends, and lives just as rich and complex as our own. And they died a terrifying and painful death, choking on dust, buried alive, believing the gods had abandoned them.
You could hear the shrieks of women, the wailing of infants and the shouting of men. Some were calling their parents, others their children or their wives, trying to recognize them by their voices. People bewailed their own fate, or that of their relatives. And there were some who prayed for death in the terror of dying. Many besought the aid of the gods, but still more imagined there were no gods left, and the universe was plunged into eternal darkness forevermore.
This episode ends, for me, on the best emotional performance in the show's history. The Doctor is trying to run away, and Donna is begging him to go back.
You can't just leave them!
Don't you think I've done enough? History's back in place and everyone dies.
In this moment, Donna reminds the Doctor of who he is, why he does what he does, and why he shouldn't travel alone. You can't always save everyone, and at times, you really shouldn't. But if you can, you have to try. It's a lesson the Doctor carries with him throughout his lives from that point on, keeping people around him to remind him when he's gone too far or hasn't done enough. It is a lesson that is constantly being reinforced. One time, he even changed his face to hammer home the point. As the night drew on, the eruption changed. There were explosions and avalanches of rock and ash and superheated gases cascading over the mountainside. Pompeii wasn't the only city destroyed in the eruption, just the one that everybody knows. The city of Herculaneum was closer to the mountain, and it was hit by a pyroplasmic flow, which flash-fried everything, including its inhabitants. It's actually better preserved because of this. Entire pieces of wood furniture surviving, and a lot of buildings intact. Overall, the eruption lasted 2 days, changing the landscape to the extent that few could say where Pompeii once stood. It was a coastal city, but the coastline had changed. Pompeii was now a kilometre inland. For the better part of 2 millennia, it laid forgotten, living on only through stories and legend, until the late 16th century, when it was rediscovered, exquisitely preserved. The work done excavating the city in the mid-18th century marked the start of modern archaeology, using the scientific method rather than treasure hunters just Indiana Jonesing their way in and destroying the context of everything they dug out. All of this reignited people's interest in the past. Not just what happened, the historic events, the stories of great men and women, but how the average person lived their lives. What they ate, what sicknesses they suffered from, what they did for leisure, what roles they held in society. Everything is so perfectly preserved, from loaves of bread still in the ovens to the graffiti on the walls, which are worth a read. It's surprisingly relatable. All this offers a window into their lives. We even know what their diet was like, thanks to excavations of the sewers and their perfectly preserved poop. If you want to know more about this stuff, there's a lot of really good documentaries available for free on YouTube. I highly recommend the channel Real History. They've done a bunch of documentaries on Pompeii, and even one on Herculaneum, which I highly recommend. Links are down in the description. This was a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to do another one of these in future, but I think I'm going to get back to doing some 8th Doctor stuff before people get really annoyed at me. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Become a channel member. If I don't have any yet, you get exclusive perks for the low price of giving me money. And why not leave something in the comments? Get in fights in the comments. If I get anything wrong in this video, then please tell me. I will leave corrections in the video and in pinned comments in the comments section. I don't want to spread misinformation, even if it's by accident, so yeah, I do take this very seriously. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I've already said that, so I'll see you in the next one.